Some houses are old. Some houses are abandoned. And then there are houses that are never truly empty. This is a story that was told to me by a realtor I know personally. He's a guy who spent years working with condemned buildings, forgotten properties, and places most people wouldn't dare to enter. But after this one incident, he swore he would never set foot in an old house again. This all happened in late November, right as the sun was setting. The building was what the locals called a rotter. It had a stone ground floor and a wooden second floor, both blackened by years of time and decay. Officially, the record showed that a single elderly woman had lived there many years ago. But the neighbors told a different story. They claimed the ground floor apartment had been vacant for over a decade, yet they often heard footsteps inside. Slow, deliberate footsteps, usually late at night. The realtor, let's call him Maxim, wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. He was a practical man. He just needed to get some measurements and take a few photos for the property valuation. He had the keys, and he was determined to get the job done quickly. Maxim arrived just as the last bit of daylight faded, plunging the street into a cold, grey twilight. The moment he slid the old key into the lock and pushed the door open, a thick, heavy smell hit him like a physical blow. It was the scent of old, yellowed newspapers, of pervasive mold, and of damp, rotting wood. But underneath it all, there was something else. A strange, sweet smell, almost like burnt sugar. It was completely out of place in a house that had been sealed for so long. He switched on his phone's flashlight, its beam cutting a narrow path through the oppressive darkness, and stepped inside. The floorboards groaned and creaked under his weight, protesting his intrusion. Strips of wallpaper hung from the walls like shedding skin, revealing the dark, stained plaster beneath. The entire apartment felt heavy, silent, and watchful. It was a feeling he couldn't shake. He made his way to the back room, which must have been the kitchen. In the center of the room stood an old, rusted cast iron stove, and sitting right on top of it was a polished copper kettle. It was shiny, spotless, almost looking brand new. It didn't belong there. Everything else in the room was covered in a thick layer of dust and decay, but this kettle looked as if it had been used just minutes ago. Maxim thought it was bizarre, but he raised his phone to take a photo for his report. That's when he heard it. A sound from right behind him. The sharp, unmistakable scrape of a match being struck. It was loud. It was clear. And it was absolutely impossible. He froze, his blood running cold. "Hello," he called out, his voice sounding small in the suffocating silence. There was no reply, just the sound of his own heart pounding in his ears. He slowly turned back toward the kitchen, his flashlight beam trembling. There was no one there. The room was just as empty as before, but the air around the stove was warm. He reached out his hand, and he could feel a distinct heat radiating from the cast iron surface. And there, lying on the burner, was a freshly burnt matchstick, a thin wisp of smoke still curling from its tip. Then he looked at the kettle. Its lid was vibrating. Just tiny, almost imperceptible movements, as if the water inside was starting to boil. But there was no fire, no sound of bubbling water. Just that impossible, silent heat. Maxim tried to rationalize it. Maybe a squatter was hiding somewhere, playing a cruel prank on him. He decided to finish his measurements as quickly as possible and get out. He rushed through the remaining rooms, his movements hasty and clumsy. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed a small, low door tucked away under the main staircase. A storage closet. It was latched shut with a simple wooden bolt. Curiosity got the better of him. He slid the bolt open, the wood scraping loudly in the quiet house, and pulled the door ajar. He almost dropped his phone. The closet was packed from floor to ceiling with children's toys. Old ones. Rag dolls with button eyes, worn wooden horses on rockers, and dented tin cars. But that wasn't the horrifying part. Every single one of them was arranged in perfect, neat rows, all facing the door. It wasn't like they were stored away. It was like they were on display. An audience, waiting, watching. And then it happened. A heavy thud came from the second floor, directly above his head. It sounded like someone had just jumped off a bed onto the floor. Immediately, the sound of running followed. Fast, frantic footsteps, circling the room right above him. The ceiling shook so violently that dust and bits of plaster rained down around him. That was it. Maxim didn't wait for another second. He bolted for the front door, stumbling in the dark, his only thought to get out. He fumbled with the lock, slammed the door shut behind him, and ran to his car. He sat there for a long moment, his heart racing, his hand shaking so much he could barely grip the steering wheel. He needed to prove to himself that it wasn't all in his head. He took a deep breath and opened his phone to check the photos he had taken. He scrolled through them: the living room, the peeling walls, the kitchen. He stopped on the kitchen photo. His stomach dropped. The polished copper kettle wasn't there. In its place, on top of the cold, dark stove, was a pile of filthy, bundled up rags. The shape of the pile looked eerily like a small child, curled up into a ball. And then he saw it. In the bottom corner of the image, barely visible in the shadows, was a hand. A pale, discolored hand with fingers that were too long and unnaturally short, reaching out from the darkness, as if trying to grab the camera. About a month later, the old house burned down. The official report cited faulty wiring as the cause, but the firefighters who were there that night told a different story. They whispered among themselves that there wasn't just one point of ignition. There were several, and all of them originated from inside that small, locked toy closet under the stairs. Maxim never went back, of course. He quit his job and now works exclusively with newly constructed buildings. He told me, in new apartments, the walls are thin. You hear sounds, but you know they belong to your neighbors. You know it's not someone from another century, boiling water and waiting for you in the dark. Some places don't forget, and some houses remember far too much. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to follow for more.